How do you deal with the responsibility of managing £7 billion on your shoulders? I mean, it's one thing doing it with the bank behind you, but then doing it by yourself, like you said, it is very daring, and obviously you do have to be very daring in your day to day, but still, it's a lot of responsibility. I think the reason why I asked that question as well is because I think even me myself, I was naive when I first started in business, especially very young, was because you don't really understand how the corporate world works. You have a dream, you have a goal, you have a mission, but ultimately business is business. And when investors are putting money in, they're expecting a certain result. They might not be guaranteed it, but ultimately they're investing to see a return, and that's responsibility. So if someone invests into a business, like you did with Love Hemp, you're doing it because you expect it to rise. And if it doesn't, ultimately, yes, it's a business and it can happen, but still, it was capital at risk. So how do you deal with doing that on such a grand scale with billions in kind of funding? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I think businesses go through cycles, and it's a very good question. And this is why my wife will probably turn around and say to you that she sees very little of me. I have 4 kids. I try and spend weekends with them, but during the weekdays I'm fairly tied up, and even on most Sundays I'm busy. It's not something that's going to continue forever, but the responsibility does bear hard, especially when you've done it for a number of years and you've outperformed, and there's an expectation that you do it again.
Welcome to another episode of Season 5 of Recipe to Success. Today I'm joined by the most credible guest. Literally, I'm excited myself, so much to learn. A lot of you may not even know his face or know his name, but when we get into the podcast, you will see how credible this individual is. Cam, thank you so much for coming on to Recipe to Success.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Honestly, it's a pleasure. I think I got a lucky token because you're not really out there. You're not someone who really puts himself in front of the cameras, but you have so much value to give. So I really, really do thank you a lot for coming on. I think my listeners and viewers are going to really love this one. So you are someone that probably most people haven't seen. So why don't you give us a bit of an introduction of who you are?
No, thank you so much. It's humbling for me to be on a podcast. You're right, I'm not someone that generally likes to be the face of something, because I like to be working in the background. But through the various purchases that we've made, I've somehow ended up with having my name out there now. So where it started off, my great-grandfather was one of the founding members of the Karachi Stock Exchange.
Wow.
So my generationally, my family did really well in terms of banking. I'm a Mirman from Pakistan, so I don't know if you know about Mirman.
Yeah. Very good tradesman, very good businessman. That's what I know.
That was in our culture, in our history. But then my grandfather, who came from wealth, lived in a 3-piece suit, spent most of his life, enjoying life, shall I say, and me and my father had to start afresh. So it was very humble beginnings that we started from. And growing up...
So meaning that he didn't leave anything behind, essentially?
Yeah, no, he effectively enjoyed the wealth that his father made. So we started from afresh. I grew up in Croydon. I went to, a difficult school, shall I say. But also, it was those kind of schools and those kind of moments that, really stood with you and reminded you of the basics when you did certain things and you wanted to get somewhere in life. I remember that specific school had a work experience, and my work experience was on a farm, and I walked into a bank that I won't mention, and said to the manager there that I don't want to go to a farm and do work experience. I would rather be in banking, because I've never seen a poor banker. So that was my mentality behind if you work for a bank, then you have a comfortable living.
You would assume, yeah.
She said, no one's approached me from this school ever before. I will speak to whoever it is, and she accepted me. So I did my work experience there. They worked out that I was fairly good with numbers, and said, look,
So you were someone that would kind of attack the opportunities that came at you, basically, because in that situation, could have been a farm, but you thought to yourself, no, I'm going to fight for something else.
yes, I've always been one to explore the boundaries and to ensure that, I put myself out there, and, there's no harm in speaking, no harm in trying. Funny enough, this weekend gone, one of my best friends got married, and I met some people I went to school with after 20 years. And
That must have been a moment.
it was really, really interesting. It was good to meet them. But what was quite interesting about that is they said that they could tell that, some with everything I had, they could see within me that they felt that I had a very good chance of, getting to where I am today. And in fact, some of them said that they wouldn't expect me to be anywhere less than where I am, which I didn't realize at the time, but obviously they noticed it, and it was also quite humbling. So coming back to the banking story, so I spoke to the lady there. She said, look, this bank is being taken over by a larger Spanish bank, and if you get good grades, then we're going to put you towards a program. And I did really well in my education then, because I had a reason to do so. And that bank took me on. I spent 10 years with them. I was part of something called a Directors for Future program, and I worked on various roles, did all my qualifications, ended up being a very young financial advisor for the firm, and then went on to be the youngest fund manager for the firm, one of the youngest to pass their financial qualifications at the time. Which then led on to opening various doors. At one point, alhamdulillah, I was, making significant sums of money in terms of bonuses, to the point that the bank would have to report the bonuses that I was making to the Bank of England, because at the time there was a there was a rule around the bonuses that could be made. There's something called an RDR review that came in, and when I saw the restrictions, and at the time it was 2008, and the bankers were being blamed for
everything.
For everything. It was a bad word, being a banker. And I kind of reassessed where I was.
How old were you at that point?
2008. So that's going. I was 20. I was 21, 22. And then I reassessed where I was, which was a big thing to do because you're making significant sums of money. But I also had, and my grounding has always been, I lost my mum when I was quite young. My grounding has always been that I've had a written bond, like unwritten bond, shall I say, with the Almighty. And it's been that, if I do this, then I'm gonna do this, which will help everyone else. Like, I will give this sum of charity. And I've always had that grounding mechanism to ensure that if I make a significant sum of money, then a certain percentage of that money, like a zakat, but I'm not going to give the number out, but a percentage of that automatically gets put away to go to, to fund, or help people that are less needy and need it the most. So worked for another investment bank, 6-7 months.
So wait, at that moment in time, you're making money, right? You're a successful young individual who's made a huge success in the banking world. You've had that mentality of, I'm going to give back and I'm going to do these things. But ultimately, you were still motivated to get to a certain destination for yourself. Was it always the case where you felt like, okay, this is my goal and this is what it looks like, but along the way, I'm going to do this good and it's actually not really all for me. I just want to get to this destination. Did you plan all of that out prior to?
It kind of happened as it went along. And I felt a bit embarrassed about my religion, if I'm honest. And I've never said this before. Only a close few people, because I had a lot of bullying and a lot of hatred towards Muslims when I grew up. And this is why I won't name the banks, but during my time at those banks, and I didn't advertise, my name was Kamran, everyone said Kamran. No one expected or assumed that I was a Muslim, and nor did I advertise it. Even when I would be fasting and I'd go out for lunch, I would, get the water bottle,
No
And
way.
like it was that kind, because I'm not going to mention any individuals, but if I'd said I was Muslim at the time, then I wouldn't probably be sitting here in front of you. So I hid that part of me, or I didn't publicize that
Yeah.
part of me. I didn't drink, I didn't do alcohol, I didn't do drugs. I've never done any of that in my life. But when people be out drinking and say, "Oh, why don't you drink?" and I would turn around and say, it's a personal choice. I had some family issues in the past. People had
With
issues
bad
with it
history,
in the
yeah.
past. So for that reason, I don't. And they wouldn't question it anymore. And if anyone asked me if I was a Muslim, I would say yes. But no one kind of asked me.
It
Everyone
wasn't a
assumed.
conversation.
Everyone thought I was Italian or Greek, or I passed for that. It was a bit more, streamlined back in those days with no beard. So I kind of got away with it. But I was hardworking. I always made sure that I outworked anyone else. So did various roles at Santander, then went on to work for a couple of other investment banks. And alhamdulillah, did really, really well, made some great connections, and always had this ambition of having my own firm, being my own boss, because I'd seen people in business and realized that, the big personalities, the big individuals had only managed to get great success from having their own kind of businesses and being their own bosses. And I was quite driven to build my own brand, and I was also quite determined to settle down. So my friend circle was very small. I don't have many friends. I go home. I have 4 kids now, alhamdulillah. Spend time with them. Have a wife. We kind of got married when I was 26, 27. So from the age of 23, 24, I was settled. I was ready to settle down.
You're a man of discipline. Almost.
Yeah, I wanted to have the discipline and have the family. And I've got 2 or 3 friends that I'd meet every couple of years. They complain that I don't have, it's just I've always been kind of focused on making something of myself, because almost when my mum passed away, I wanted to ensure that I kind of made her proud, and then being the eldest of 4, being an example. So it was always kind of, my wife says to me, I've always been very boring and kind of always stuck. So I was kind of head down, do what needs to be done. So alhamdulillah, what really opened up my eyes to being proud of my religion was when I got headhunted by a Sharia compliant investment bank based out of South Africa, and they asked me to be the CEO and help them launch that brand in the UK, which I agreed to do. So I spent a year in South Africa with them. Very, very great people, very nice people, learnt a lot, and seeded a significant sum of money for them, helped get them the FCA license, and then set them up in Knightsbridge. And when I did that, I realized I had all the connections, I had all the people, just needed kind of the right amount of funding to be able to set up on my own. And that's where Portillion Capital was born. So I remember now, in November 2012, we incorporated the business. A couple of months before, I met my wife, and got married. And there was a gentleman who, again, I won't name, but very, very well-to-do individual, kind of Sunday Times rich list, English gentleman who always backed me and said, you've done very well for me in investments that you've made across various places I've invested with you. And he followed me around in various places, and he funded the business to help me set up Portillion. I sat in front of the regulator, and they said, you're one of the youngest individuals asking for a regulatory license, for an investment banking license. Why should we approve you? Presented my business plan, and within 4 months, we were authorized. That was a special feeling. So we had our license to be able to advise and manage people's money, and that's where it really kind of kicked off from. So today we manage over multiple 9-figure sums, so over £7 million. We invest across all asset classes. There isn't a deal that comes to the UK where I'm not shown that transaction. So Portillion is really well known in the investment banking circles, We've made some significant transactions and made some significant returns. And then there's a smaller group of investors like me and a couple of close clients that will take part in smaller transactions, and that's where we'll go out and buy businesses and look at higher risk opportunities and so on and so forth. So Portillion, alhamdulillah, is doing really well. But back when the business was first launched, I was quite keen to help because people don't understand what Sharia compliance is, and I think the non-Muslims understand it better. Sharia compliance is effectively another level of governance. So you know how you have when you're buying something from the shop and it's vegan, that's a level of governance to ensure that vegetarians can eat it. From an investment point of view, Sharia compliance is another level of governance where you're not investing in any haram products, like you're not investing in gambling or not highly interest backed. You don't have huge debts on the books of those investments, or you're not investing in arms dealing or anything that's prohibited in that sense. So based on those ethics, I set up something called the Portillion Capital Sharia Compliant Seed Investment Scheme, because the UK government gives every individual an allowance to invest into startup companies, and but the risk to that individual for their capital is 13.5%. So they kind of give you 86.5% relief against that investment that you make into a startup business, which I thought was a huge gap. And I managed to speak on the World Economic Islamic Forum about it. It got a lot of profile, but there wasn't that many Muslim businesses around at the time. Now I speak to some people that have done amazingly well. I won't mention any names, but they're like, why don't we have something like this? But I thought about this, and this is why I set up that, and that did really well for people. So yeah, we've at Portillion, we've always innovated to help people, and that Sharia compliant investment startup scheme wasn't just for Muslim individuals. In fact, the companies that did really well were conventional companies. They were led by English, Irish individuals that went on to sell at 20, 30 times the amount of money that we kind of put in. But there are various incentives available.
I think ultimately, if you look at even Sharia law as an example, like we've seen millions of people decide to move to Dubai or surrounding nations, and ultimately when they're doing that, they're accepting that look, we're happy to live under Sharia law. Dubai gives you that opportunity to still have your Western fun and values in a way as well, but ultimately you're following the law of the land, and they sign up to that. So it makes sense that there would be a lot of non-Muslims that would be happy with the Sharia compliance.
Yeah, so I mean, Sharia compliance from an investment perspective it's just an extra DD. If anything, it's a higher level of governance to normal. So yeah, so coming back to that did really well. And then between once I had a pot of cash, I was quite keen on acquiring other businesses and look at very innovating and up and coming spaces. CBD was a big thing back in 2016, 2017. The Financial Conduct Authority, our regulator, allowed for the first time for investment within the CBD space, and me and a group of investors invested some money in a company called Cellular Goods, which on the first day of trading did 10x for us. We were sold within an hour. So we had this pot of money, and we said, if this space is going to be really, really good, let's look at a company that is the leader within the space and has the potential to take the market on and develop its products, innovate, and then go on and be something bigger within the space. Love Hemp then came to mind from all the research that we did, and we made an investment into Love Hemp, which was the UK's leading CBD brand at the time. And when you invest in a company, or when I invest in a company, I like to know what's going on. I like to know how the financials are doing, what's happening on a day-to-day basis. A CEO will probably speak to me more than he speaks to his wife when I make an investment in a company, because we want to make sure we're managing people's money properly. but Love Hemp wouldn't give us the correct information. So how I came to acquire Love Hemp was I requisitioned the board of Love Hemp at the time, which means that if you have more than 5% of a company, you can call an extraordinary general meeting to say, you know, either to remove the board or to kind of put your views down as an investor of how a company's performing. So at the time, I'd put down that this company is going to go bust if it continues currently because it's not financially prudent and the management aren't doing things properly. Within 2 months of me putting that requisition out, the regulator came out and suspended Love Hemp from trading.
Wow.
In addition, it fined it the highest fine the biggest fine it'd given to a CBD company at the time. That meant that Love Hemp were already struggling because of mismanagement, but then couldn't raise any external capital. And I'd also said in that requisition that if this company continues in the same way, it will go bust. They contacted me in November 2022, and the CEO I know really well. He's a really, really good guy. He's the founder of the business, but then sold the business to investors, and those guys ended up making a right mess of it. We then gave the company some debt, and I said to the company at the time, "We'll give you some debt, but I don't have time to do DD because I'm going away with my family to enjoy, Christmas. Once I come back, then I'll look at it in a bit more detail and see where we can go from there." Within the first week of January 23, my CFO went into the business and realized that the previous directors we gave the debt to had not informed us of the whole picture. So we then called in our debt, and there was some public press about what the business was going through at the time, and then put the business into kind of a post-pack administration, and then I personally ended up putting another couple of million quid, or close to 5 million quid, to buy the business, to recapitalize it, because I believed in the brand and believed in what it was doing for people. Because from a usage point of view, it's a phenomenal, what it does for people is really, really good. But from a management and a business point of view, it wasn't really working really well. But even though it had phenomenal partnerships, it had like the UFC partnership, had the Anthony Joshua partnership. So I took a bit of a gamble, bought the business from admin, restarted it, and today, alhamdulillah, that business is really, really doing well. From what I paid for it to what it's potentially going to be listed back on the stock market for, and some of the offers that we had, we're looking at between 8 to 10x as a return in the space of 3 to 4 months. But to get there, me and my team have worked significantly.
3 to 4 months?
3 to 4 months. We purchased the business on the 23rd of February.
No way.
And yeah, we are here today.
So we're talking roughly around £50 million.
Potentially, yeah. I'm not going. Yeah, those are the not far off the mark, but yeah. I mean, alhamdulillah, I can't complain.
That's crazy.
But that business already had a very core established brand. It was already in Holland and Barrett. It was already in Tesco's. It's already in Superdrugs and Boots. It's got over 1 million people that use it. And one of the key things I managed to do, and I brought in a phenomenal team. This CBD brand has a management team which any mining or financial institution will be proud of. We've got an actual judge on our board, who, a really good lady called Francesca Yardley. We have Sir Iqbal Sakrani on the board, who was, the founding member of the Muslim Council of Britain and a key advisor to various royal families and institutions globally. Of the funds that we manage, we're not going to name the names of those families, but we manage money across. So we had a similar connection because we manage money globally for some of those similar families. Then we've got Mitesh Soni, who worked with me previously at an investment bank, and he is the head of trading at Numis, just been taken over by Deutsche Bank. And he's one of the top actuaries in the country. And you got myself, Famida, and Tony on the board. So from a board perspective, from a team that we brought on into the CBD, in a CBD company, from a governance point of view, is very, very strong. With that team, we made some significant decisions, which then allowed the business to flourish. So you look at Love Hemp today, it's the world's first Halal CBD business, the world's first approved halal CBD business.
You know, by the way, I have so many questions.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I'll keep on going.
No, I love it. To be honest, it's a super interesting story. But I will kind of, I don't want to interrupt you
No,
too
no,
much.
keep going. I
will,
think I can keep on talking.
I'll
here,
definitely
so.
delve into a few different areas because I'm sure our viewers will definitely have lots of questions right now as well. But on the halal CBD topic, right? I think I saw a video. I think you did like an event or some sort of interview, and Tony was also present. And this conversation came up about halal CBD. And in my mind, straight away, I was thinking, how can CBD be halal? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I basically assumed, okay, CBD comes from marijuana and it's extracted, and obviously marijuana is haram. So how can CBD be halal? And then you kind of went into it. But for people that are wondering, how does that even become a thing?
The key element is that, over 1,000 years, we had Muslim scholars from the Ottoman times speaking about the benefits of CBD. In fact, there's 6 books published and written by scholars of that age of the benefits of CBD. But why CBD becomes halal is because, why CBD becomes halal is simply because there is no THC element to it. So when we do the extraction process and make the CBD oil, we take out the element that gives you the high. So the psychoactive element of it is taken out, which is why it's halal. There's prominent scholars and people doing the research will see and kind of given their fatwa already in terms of CBD being halal from a medicinal point of view. The likes of Mufti Menk has done a very strong video on the benefits of CBD. But the benefits of Love Hemp CBD and why it's halal, and to get halal, you have to go through a rigorous testing process, which we did. You only get the medicinal benefits, so you don't get intoxicated, you don't get high, you don't feel out of this world or whatever. So those are the key reasons why CBD is halal.
So why would anyone want to do CBD? What's the benefits of CBD?
So going back to the same books that were written, and we see it every day. Even if you go onto lovehemp.com and go to Trustpilot reviews, you see about about people that are struggling on a day-to-day basis, and they're looking. They've accepted that post-COVID that feeling a bit anxious or feeling depressed or not being able to have a good night's sleep means that you have to go on to certain medications with significant side effects. CBD has a wide has wide ranging uses and benefits, and you can see some of the reviews, but predominantly it helps you from an anxious point of view, helps calm you down so you're not anxious. The endocannabinoids within the CBD oil are already generated by the body, but those enhance mood, enhance the way that you feel. They also help the way that you sleep and the quality of sleep that you have. So, when the doctor says, I'm going to give you sleep medication, the side effects of that are significant. I'm not a doctor. Tony would have been, someone that can go into a bit more detail, and that's where CBD is really, really kind of flourished. And then the higher strength CBD also, I'm not saying that it's proven, but has been noted by various people that it's helped with significant issues in terms of cancer and more kind of serious illnesses. I came across CBD because my sister has rheumatoid arthritis, and she was struggling with the steroids that she was having. And when she started to use CBD, it changed the way that she was living and working, and her day-to-day life had significantly improved. So that's where I came across it as a sector. And then as I learned more and found out more, then I ended up, being in Love Hemp. So it's quite a well-known, and it's getting out there. It's available across, significant retail outlets, and is growing. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be, a mainstay within people's kind of day-to-day lives from a health and wellness perspective, but also from a medicinal perspective.
Very interesting. So let's go back a little bit to some of the story, because like I said, so many interesting things that we can definitely go into a little bit deeper. So in regards to the capital firm, right? We spoke about this off camera. You know, I love Billions, the TV series. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen it, but you know, very very cool series. Anyone who loves business, entrepreneurship, money, success would love that show, because you see, you know, billions of dollars being managed and what happens behind the scenes and how things are. Um, but for anyone that really doesn't understand, I want to break it down into layman's terms. So you came from a banking world where ultimately you're investing funds that are provided to you in this bank. Um, Now, obviously, in the banking world, they use consumer money as well as business money, corporate money, and they use that money and they invest it into various things, gold, shares, etc. Right? Correct?
Yes, correct.
So you basically then said to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this myself, and I've already got the contacts, I've already got the people. So let's break it down into like basic terms. So let's say I'm a super wealthy individual. I've decided that I've got 10 million pounds that I want to invest. So I would come to you and you would basically then deal with that and kind of invest it. Like I would love to go into a bit more detail
So,
about
for example, if you were, you know, wealthy individual that had 10 million of cash, you would come to us. We would work out what plans you've got, you know, work out the overall goal for that investment, and then we'd work out, you know, what amount can be invested. Because, you know, if you've got 10 million in cash, that means you might have some debt, you might have some other bits and pieces, and whatever's left after that that you're willing to take a risk on, because investing has, you know, risk. It's not something that is without risk.
Of
We
course.
try and manage that risk by you know, the governance that we have in place to work out where you invest and how to invest. And I can give you some names in a second. But then once we've done that assessment of where you are and how much you're willing to play, then you'd invest that money with us, and then we would invest it for you in equity markets, or you know, wherever you've suggested that you're comfortable with investing into to make a return.
Mm.
So, for example, we were one of the largest investors and first investors in a company called Afritin, which was a old tin mine that the South African government had closed down because the tin prices had gone down. We saw that there was a potential for tin prices to go up with electric cars, and we were investors of Tesla back then. We realized that, you know, looking through Tesla's balance sheet and business model, that there was a lack of tin supply, and if the market picked up in the electric car space, then there would be a significant demand on tin pricing. So we secured that tin mine. We listed it on London Stock Exchange as the first tin mine that was listed in the UK, and we made a significant sum of money. Even as we speak today, that stock is up 20+% just today, because, you know, from where it is to where it's going to go to is high. So it's kind of spotting those opportunities and where the trends are going, and then to be able to invest in that space to then make a return for investors. Some investors will be happy with a 20% return. Some investors will be happy to wait a longer term to make it, you know, a significant return. When we don't always get it right, because look at Love Hemp, you know, people that invested in that business initially lost out, and then we ended up purchasing the business and it's restarted, and so on and so forth. But you know, generally we have a rule that if we're investing in 10 companies and we get, you know, half of them right, we've done a really good job. And if we've got half of them right, then it's meant that our clients have made a significant return, which alhamdulillah we've been able to do year in, year out. In a similar way, people don't think of Nigeria as a place to mine. We took a significant position in a mine in Nigeria, a gold mine in Nigeria, which was the first gold mine in Nigeria. With the African Development Bank, we invested some funding, and Shagan there is, you know, a phenomenal CEO. The first year of production was more than the build cost of the mine. That business is now doing over $150 million of revenue, with a, you know, good runway to continue to do so, and has made significant returns. We did the same with when we invested in Tesla. We saw, you know, I drove Elon Musk's Tesla car in London, and this is going back 10, 12 years, and I was absolutely astounded by the technology it had, but I knew it was too soon. I remember, you know, taking a position within that stock, and we probably sold a bit too early because it went up 30 times, but you know, we made a very good return. In a similar way, I invested in Amazon back then because I was you know, and ASOS, and seeing how they were doing, and you know, we did really well because 10 years ago, the kind of online retail market space, because everyone was, going into shops, really took off, and those made some great returns. So it's just kind of being able to pick out where the market's going to.
Where did you learn that? Was that something that was taught to you in the banking world, or was it something that you just had a knack for?
I think that is having a knack for. I've always been cautious by nature and curious by nature as well. So taking a cautious approach to finding about things, and having that kind of mentality meant that I would always ask extra questions. I'd always want to know more and more and more and more. It would, nothing would satisfy me. So it's kind of going into like the finite detail. I remember sitting when COVID kicked off, saying to my wife and mother-in-law, let's stock up on baby milk, because there's going to be, a run on trying to get hold of things. And my wife and mother-in-law laughed at me and said, what do you mean? I said, I can see from trailers and from shipments in China from on my screen that there's a slowdown there. So if there's a slowdown in the biggest economy in the world, especially the biggest servicing economy in the world, then that means that's going to fall through. And if that's happened, that means this virus is spreading. And then I contracted COVID in February 2020, and I felt the severity of it. And then from March, I think from sort of end of February, you saw the biggest decline in stock markets ever. And alhamdulillah, we managed to position the portfolios in a way where we were out and cash, and then benefited from when the market fell, to then have a huge ride. So that was one of our strongest years. So it's kind of picking up on those trends, but you also have to be a bit daring in terms of making those calls. Similar to when Brexit happened, we sold all of our UK holdings, just because the risk, the downside was that if we got it wrong and Brexit didn't happen, then we might miss out on 4 or 5% performance on, like, I know we had some holdings like Barclays and come over for the conventional side, and a couple of other UK, Anglo-American, a couple of other. But the US side of the portfolio, in terms of Amazon and US listed stocks, we didn't sell any of those. And overnight, we made an 18-20% gain on holding US stocks and shares, because the pound devalued by 18%. So, and then all the banking stocks and kind of the UK stocks went down when Brexit happened. But the downside of doing that was we might miss out on 4 or 5%. But the risk was, if we didn't do that, then we would have significant losses, or losses on the returns that people had already made within the portfolio. So it's kind of assessing risk in the right way. Obviously, got a nice team to be able to do that with. But it's understanding how markets perform, because people think, I'm going to go and buy this stock. And any other stocks that I mentioned, please do your own research and understand where they are, and understand your own capital that you can risk, rather than going to buy the stocks that I've mentioned, simply because this is not investment advice, and you have to assess your own, personal needs and personal risk appetite before going to buy shares. And that's quite important to say, because you don't want people to go and, so you have to have, and that's why we charge a fee. That's why we are professionals within the sector. So having that mentality and then moving it on to businesses that we're now buying allows us to assess things in a proper and correct way.
How do you deal with the responsibility of managing £7 billion on your shoulders? I mean, it's one thing doing it with the bank behind you, but then doing it by yourself, like you said, it is very daring. And obviously you do have to be very daring in your day-to-day, but still, it's a lot of responsibility. I think the reason why I asked that question as well is because I think even me, myself, I was naive when I first started in business, especially very young, was because you don't really understand how the corporate world works. You have a dream, you have a goal, you have a mission, but ultimately business is business. And when investors are putting money in, they're expecting a certain result. They might not be guaranteed it, but ultimately they're investing to see a return, and that's responsibility. So if someone invests into a business, like you did with Love Hemp, you're doing it because you expect it to rise. And if it doesn't, ultimately, yes, it's a business and it can happen, but still, it was capital at risk. So how do you deal with doing that on such a grand scale with billions in kind of funding? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I think businesses go through cycles, and it's a very good question. and this is why my wife will probably turn around and say to you that she sees very little of me. You know, I have 4 kids. I try and spend weekends with them, but during the weekdays I'm fairly tied up, and even on most Sundays I'm busy. It's not something that's going to continue forever, but you know, the responsibility does you know, bear hard, especially when you've done it for a number of years and you've outperformed, and there's an expectation that you do it again. But what I always say, the market, and you don't always get it right, but as I said, if you get majority of it right, then you'll be doing well. But the market always either overprices or underprices on the future prospect of how something's going to do. So from either being in a recession or from being in a growth cycle, the market will price an individual business or an individual company on that basis. It's just finding, it's about rolling your sleeves up and finding where you believe the true value is, and then to invest below that true value so that you know that you can make a return. It's just making sure that you assess risk in the correct manner.
And these investors that because it's a lot of money we're talking about to be managing.
Yeah.
It's not a small fee, even in the hedge fund or funding world. That's a lot of capital to be dealing with. So how did you even begin with that? Was it just a matter of using contacts that you had already, or like how did that? Because this is serious. It was curiosity.
We never marketed. If you look at my website, there's a gentleman that does stuff for Love Hemp, and he says that your website is you know, how do you even get clients, because your website's so old. It looks like, you know, it's not even been updated, and it's something I need to get around to updating. But if you look at predominantly investment banks, they've never marketed. I mean, they've marketed for clients, but their website's never been something that you look at and it's going to, you know, blow you away. And I know you understand SEO a lot better than I do, because I'm still a novice in it. But we've never marketed it. It's just been through word of mouth. You know, when I set up that business and my business partner came on board, who's one of the wealthiest people within the UK, he had a network of individuals that all joined and invested alongside to them, and then they had individuals, and they had individuals, and they had individuals. And at one point, I was saying no to people and turning them away because you know, we're limiting, and now we don't do that anymore, but we were limiting the amount of money because we didn't want too much money sitting in cash, you know. But on the larger amount of funds, we don't invest in companies less than 250 million market cap. We take positions where we can go in and out and make returns, and you know, some longer term investments that we can take part in that, you know, are backed by certain big players that we know that there's going to be liquidity in. You know, Lucid is one of them. You know, you can see that over 70% is now owned by the you know, public investment fund of Saudi Arabia, and you know, we've taken various positions and made various profits on those positions, and then came out, and you know, we may have re-entered again now after their recent fundraise. So it's just kind of having the right mentality and right timing, but also we don't make those investment decisions without speaking to our own clients. So, and this is where the work's involved. So we'll see an opportunity, we might present it to Mr. XYZ that's in charge of X family office, and they will assess it within their space and then give us the go ahead to go and do so. So it's quite an involved, bespoke kind of thing that we do. Although we manage, you know, plus over 7 billion, we're in a group of, you know, high net worth individuals. It's not like we're managing thousands and thousands of individuals.
Just a few billionaires, basically.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so now I kind of want to go into the investment side of things in terms of you're a business and someone wants to buy you out because you've got experience on the side of raising capital for yourself,
yeah,
but also, you know, buying a business from scratch. So I want to know what do you look for when you're buying a business, either from the CEO, either from you know, the operation. As an example, with Love Hemp, you saw that business was being managed poorly, and you found a way to kind of, you know, distract the board or almost catch them off guard and go through the process, and then you bought it, right? That was a genius move that most people cannot even think about, right? But you obviously identified that, look, this business is being managed poorly. And by doing this and this and this, within a few months, you're almost at 50 million. That's a huge feat, and something that obviously you have, seasoned yourself over the years in being in the capital world. But what are those things that you kind of look at from a business? Okay, I'm gonna invest into this, and even if the CEO is removed or the people that were the founders are removed, this business will not only, uh, you know, sustain what it's doing already, but it will flourish. That's my question. Is how do you identify those things?
So, it's a good question. And the key thing to see is there a market? So are there consumers that use the business or could use the business? Is it already established? Is poor management the means that there's a lack of, there's a lack of corporate governance, which is leading for poor performance. And if that changes, is there an opportunity for the business to jump significantly? In Love Hemp's space, in Love Hemp's case, there was already an established market. There was already consumers that were benefiting from it daily. There was a lack of cash within the business because of mismanagement. Did it have the opportunity to expand across different markets, which it did? We'll be launching Love Hemp in the US with the UFC partnership, which was one of the other key aspects of it. The way I saw it was, even if I bought Love Hemp and it didn't do anything more than it was doing, but I just licensed out the UFC agreement because it was a global license to various other CBD providers globally, that I knew would give me back more of a return than I paid to purchase the business. So it's finding those opportunities within those spaces. I know you're quite heavily involved in certain brands, and it's like, for example, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it or not, but chai, it's a great concept. Everyone loves chai. Everyone will probably in our own communities have chai before they go to bed. To then bring that out and have a specific brand like that available for people to go to, that might have had dinner at home or might have had dinner at another place. It's almost like a Starbucks or a coffee of our own kind of community, and now expanding into traditional markets. So it's finding those people that are passionate and seeing there's a potential market for it. And then, there's a lot of it that also comes down to, I always say, you have to have belief in yourself, have to believe in the business, but then also it comes down to how you are as an individual. You need to ensure that every decision that you make, you make it in compliance with, with your religious need or being in the right kind of way. And when I do that, I see, does it benefit us? Does it benefit our own community as well as the wider community? And in most cases, whether it's a tin mine or whether it's a gold mine or whether it's a gem mine, or whether it's energy, whether it's some energy saving facilities, or whether it's a CBD company, these generally go out and improve people's lives on a day-to-day basis, and it's having that kind of business acumen, I think, to make the correct decisions.
So you're basically able to identify quite early on if this project is worth investing, if I'll see a return on investment. And in the case of Love Hemp, I'm not sure how much you can go into detail, but you had obviously found out some things after you already kind of got involved, once you opened the hood of the business essentially, and there were some things that didn't really match with what they had said. In those scenarios, what normally happens in a business? Do people just pull out of the agreement, or like how would that work? Because a lot of people, they don't share too much until you get down to the nitty gritty. I mean, we see it all the time, even in Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Like sometimes deals don't go through in the end because they lied essentially.
Yeah, benefits of working in banking is you've seen and worked in mergers and acquisitions. You know how transactions work. You know where to look and how to look and what to find. Having that kind of due diligence allows to benefit. But coming back to your question, it's just having the know-how to establish and realize a trend, but then also ensure that you have the right team of people around you to then grow that to the right place. Like, for example, with Love Hemp, it was unfortunate because although I bought the business, there was £40 million of funds invested into that business. I didn't invest 40 million, but I invested. Previous investors invested for that brand to be where it was. So technically, I was picking up a business worth 40 million
For 5.
for you know, a lot less than what the real value of investment had gone in. But had I not picked up that business, then it would have gone bust, or someone else would have bought it. So
Why would it have gone bust, by the way? Because they weren't following compliance.
because it had run out of cash. You know, when I gave them that debt, it was effectively
They had to pay you back.
they had to, no, not just to pay me back, but I gave them that cash because they had an ex-CFO in the business who then had